If I asked you throughout the history of organized tennis who has been the most unsportsmanlike player, what would your answer be? Do single acts of unsportsmanship stain a player's career forever? Are repeated acts of self-assault viewed as unsportsmanlike? What about swearing, foul play, yelling, or breaking more rackets in consecutive order than most tennis fans will own in their entire lives? If we go off a single act, then maybe we could say Zverev's attack on the chair umpire at the Mexican Open takes the cake. Or maybe Hugo Gaston's despicable act against Kyrgios in Madrid, where he intentionally dropped a ball mid-point, which has stained his career ever since. To get a fair and just answer, we have to look past the single acts that can come to define a person's career and peer into their attitude throughout their careers. To do this, we will mainly be focusing on the men's tour. The men on tour statistically display more aggressive attitudes, and as a consequence, they tend to perform more unsportsmanlike acts. Not saying that the women's tour is a utopian dream of sunshine and rainbows, where most rackets are broken by men. The women's tour have their own method of unsportsmanlike behavior. To get as fair of a view as we can, we'll be looking at a few metrics. To do this, we'll look at the total number of fines paid in terms of dollars, number of code violations, disqualifications, and the severity of suspensions. Lastly, we'll look at what I like to call the eye test. You see, there's a fine line between appropriate outlandishness and outright unsportsmanlike behavior. And though it can be hard to draw the line at times, we all know it when we see it. The ATP, ITF, and WTA introduced a code violation system in the 1970s. Depending on the severity of these codes and the frequency, the player's opponent could be awarded points or even the entire match. Alongside these penalties came with a new penalty system: fines. Big, fat fines. Some of the most notable of which have been staggering amounts. Hugo Gaston's act against Kyrgios that we mentioned previously, resulting in a staggering $150,000 fine. That was more than his total prize money for the year. Some players end up paying more fines over their careers than others, but in general, most players pay a fine at some point in their careers, which may be a reflection on just how frustrating the game of tennis can be. Take the mighty king of Switzerland and the darling of tennis, for example. Despite his professionalism and luscious hair, he has not been exempt from a fine or two in his career. Across his career, Federer paid a total of $67,000 in fines. Closely alongside him, the Prince of Red Clay at $68,000. However, given their combined $260 million career earnings, I'd say this is more of a slap in the wrist and likely a price they'd be happy to pay again. We start to see some notorious personalities sitting slightly down from there. Ostapenko totaling $60,000. Bernard, I just count money, Tomic paying off some of his money at $58,000. Further down the list, we see Tsitsipas at $34,000, Medvedev $32,500, Jimmy Connors $30,000, Rublev at $25,000, though I will say his body has taken more of a beating than his wallet has. And right down at the bottom of this list, we see Ruud at $3,000. Even the darling Norwegian Ruud hasn't avoided a fine, though it was comically as a result of going to the bathroom to change without ever actually using the toilet. So the fine didn't exactly fit the bill. Moving up from here, we start to see some expected names. Boris Becker at $71,000, John, you cannot be serious, McEnroe at $80,000, Verdasco at a whopping $100,000, Serena Williams at $110,000, Marat Safin $114,000. So far so good for the charities the ATP, ITF, and WTA donate their money to. Getting past all of those players, we start to move to the cream of the crop. Starting off with arguably the GOAT, Novak, I'll win all the Grand Slams and you'll enjoy Djokovic at $254,000, a very, very large step up from his other compatriots. Moving up from there, we have Fabio, what even is footwork Fognini at an enormous $327,000. And standing alone on her own at $400,000 is the loudest lady in the room, Maria Sharapova. Now, I will say there are some outliers here in Djokovic and Sharapova. The majority of Djokovic's fines came from missing media appearances, and Sharapova's main fine came from utilizing banned substances. Whether these are unsportsmanlike acts or not, you can be the judge. But we're focusing mainly on court behavior. Whatever goes on behind the scenes is none of our business, which means at over $200,000 more than the nearest player, Fabio Fognini stands in a league of his own. If it wasn't for one man, Nicholas Hilmi Kyrgios. In his career so far, spanning 9 years from 2013 to 2022, Nick has paid $525,000 in fines. That's enough to buy a 3-bed, 3-bar, 2,600 square foot in Texas. You could buy a new racket every single day for the next 5 years and still have some money to spare. And this all gets even crazier when we factor in the total amount players paid in fines compared to their total career earnings. Outside of Fognini, he is quite literally in an entirely different stratosphere as the other players, and his career may not even be over. Nick Kyrgios is invariably the GOAT at something. But does the eye test back this up? I will say after countless hours of rummaging through data, it has been nearly impossible to calculate the number of rackets someone has broken in his career. But I'd say, and I'm sure you'll agree, Kyrgios would be right up there. It's also no surprise that he's had the most code violations out of anyone on this list, with McEnroe coming in at a close second. McEnroe played from the 70s through to the early 90s, so adjusting for inflation, his total fines are much higher. Despite these two being the most unsportsmanlike tennis players on paper, McEnroe has carved himself an illustrious career in the media and is one of the most liked personalities in the space. Kyrgios is not far off accomplishing that feat himself, as he has begun to commentate on the majors this year and appears to have a good relationship with the players on tour. So does this pass the eye test? In my opinion, no. But no one would deny that the behaviours from both McEnroe and Kyrgios have been inappropriate. Comical, sure. Entertaining, absolutely. But by no means are they appropriate, and they have been punished accordingly. There are players who pass the eye test for unsportsmanship with flying colours. This test comes in the form of tanking, defeatist attitude, ungratefulness, and unprofessionalism on the court. And if you put a gun to my head and asked me who the most unsportsmanlike player in history is, I'd say Bernard Tomic. But the numbers don't lie. Who in your eyes has been the most unsportsmanlike player of all time? Is it Nick Kyrgios, or does the eye test reign supreme? If you end up enjoying this video, please be an ace and subscribe. It's free and you can always change your mind. Catch you in the next one. Peace.